Welcome to your Daily Dose. My name is Robert, and I'm here with my friend Dan. Dan, we met at ATMRD, which is a conference in Washington, D.C., Advanced Therapeutic and Movement something disorder. What's the R? Do you know?
No, now that you say it, I'm not sure what the R stands for.
Darn, I missed the R. Well, we met there. And it was a very cool thing. I remember this was back in June, just coming off of the World Parkinson Congress. I was a little tired and coming across the country. And the opening night, we had this experience where you were a panelist, and it was about empathy.
Hmm.
And to introduce you so people know, you're not only a medical doctor with a deep history in the military, you are also a person with Parkinson's and diagnosed when?
2023.
Okay. So relatively new to this diagnosis. And this empathy workshop or experience, I guess, as I'd call it, was really interesting. Not only did you guys get up there and talk, but there were things going on that I didn't know and they didn't reveal until after the fact. Did you know some of the effects and ways they were going to be messing with us empathetically was going to happen during the conference?
I was aware that some of the things that were going to happen because last year they had done something similar in terms
Okay,
of having folks do things like eat with their non-dominant hand and stuff
right.
like that. Some of the other things that they threw in, loud booms or things that were up on the screens that we were told to ignore and just pretend they weren't there, while other people were looking at them, and that was kind of, I guess, a way to consider the concepts of hallucinations and delusions as a way to introduce that. Um, there were some other mechanisms, some other sensory things that they did in terms of pureed food if you have trouble chewing, and yeah, so we were aware of some of them because they didn't want us to react to them. That was the
Yeah.
goal.
Well, it was interesting. I know my bias coming into that is I have a background in audio video, and I know what it's like to be somewhere where audio is not working correctly. And I kept thinking, oh boy, they're having a rough night back there in the booth because there were squeals, there was music coming on inappropriately. And I swear, I almost went back there to say, guys, you might want
That's right.
to
No one's wanted to fix it for them.
let me see if I can help you. But that was the entire experience, of course, was that you mentioned the hallucinations and delusions. That is a part of Parkinson's not a lot of people know as much about. And it was a way to say, oh, wait a minute. So somebody experiencing these things neurologically, this might be somewhat what like they experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was the thought process behind it. Was you know, for those of us who were in on the, I guess, the idea of it, we were told to ignore it and pretend as if it never happened, so that the person who was seeing it or looking at it, you would look at them and, is there something? Is there something you're seeing? What? And then,
Mhm.
yeah, didn't you just hear that big boom? Or, no, I don't know what you're talking about. To kind of give them a sense of what that would feel like to
Yeah.
have be well. Surely everyone else saw it too, right? Kind of gives them that pause for, what did I really see, or did I even really see that? That was the concept behind it.
It's very interesting because just as you describe it, it brings up to me, one of the things that I don't think people pay enough attention to about Parkinson's, which is the potentially isolating nature of it. That
Hmm.
this is happening to me, that I am therefore an inside outsider because my brain or my experience of the world is not what other people are having. And maybe I am damaged or wrong or whatever judgment you might put on that because of what I'm experiencing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is the fear that it might happen to you, right?
Yeah,
So it's
that's
been
right.
interesting since we had that experience. Before we had that experience, I live in Florida, in Orlando, Florida, which is known for having cockroaches, right? I mean, they are ubiquitous in Florida, particularly when it's really rainy. They try to find their way into places, and so every once in a while we'll find a cockroach in our house that makes its way usually up through the drains or something like that in the bathroom. And so there was there was a time where it was particularly late at night, and I turned on a light, and I saw a small cockroach go across the floor, and it kind of disappeared into a crevice, and then I looked for it because what do? You kill cockroaches in your house. I couldn't find it anywhere, and so at the time I thought, well, those things are pretty crafty, so not a big deal. But then I went to the ATMRD and we were talking about hallucinations, and I was like, maybe that was really, maybe that wasn't an actual cockroach there. Maybe there was something that was, not there. And this is just the beginning of something that I wasn't aware of at the time. And
Mm.
then it's happened now that not too long ago. It was pretty late again, and I saw a mosquito land on my hand, and I went to kill the mosquito, which I expected to kill the mosquito, uh, but I didn't see the remains of a mosquito on my hand. So now I'm like, holy crap! Am I having hallucinations? So and if I am, what does that mean? For the progression of the
Right.
disease and the fear associated with it. So a lot of that, I think almost more of a burden is the fear of what that's going to be like if it really happens, and what am I going to do about that? Which was kind of the question I had for Ryan Reynolds in that
I was just going to go there. That's right. So let me set that up before you go there because I want to hear the story. So one of the advocates in this world for Acadia, because they produce Nuplazid, which is specifically for hallucinations and delusions, is Ryan Reynolds, right? The very famous movie actor. And his father had these, and he passed, I believe, in about 2014, 2016, somewhere in there.
yeah,
At any
about 10
rate,
years.
yeah, it wasn't discussed at the time. So his family had a really rough go with it, particularly his mom living with his father at that age. Ryan was out of the house. And because people didn't know about it, it made things very difficult. And his father refused to acknowledge it. So that's the setup with who Ryan is. And Ryan is a spokesperson who joins us at the conference that night. But look at Ryan's all world, very difficult to get to, and not many questions are asked, but this guy gets to ask one. So go ahead and take me through that because it was amazing.
Well, so it was kind of funny because I I've never been shy to ask questions, but in public speaking situations. But I had made it. I had been thinking about a question. If I had a chance to ask a question, what would I ask? And but I was not going to ask a question unless it was just obvious that there was an opportunity. So when they said, does anyone have any questions? I looked around this room and no one raised their hand.
Yeah.
And it took a while, like just literally no one raised their hand. And so I kept watching, I kept watching, I kept watching. Eventually, it was an awkward 30 seconds to a minute where no one was wanting to ask this question. So I said, well, okay, I'll ask a question. So I raised my hand, and it was between me and one other person who raised our hands about the same time. But for whatever reason, they brought the microphone over to me. And I had said I prefaced the question. I'm a father, and I have 7 children, which Ryan was kind of taken aback by that. He says, wait a minute, you have 7 children? I said, yes, 7 children, one amazing wife. And one of the things that scares me the most is that if I were have hallucinations and delusions, how that would affect them. And so because he obviously had a very challenging situation from his history and kind of what he shared for how his father managed the situation. And so the question I asked him was, you know, as a child of a person who lived with this, what would you wish that your father had told you that would have made this easier on you? Because if it does happen to me, well, I'm going to suffer through it, but I don't want my family to have to suffer through it any more than they absolutely have to. And so that was the genesis of the question. Was basically, what did you wish your dad had said to you that would have made it easier on you to manage this situation? So that was the genesis behind it.
And then he says,
So first, so I've watched this clip. It's out there in a couple of different venues,
yeah.
and well, the first thing he says is he took his glasses off, and
Mhm.
it really hit him on an emotional level.
It did.
He and when I saw that happen, I kind of also addressed the lady that was there, who was the spouse of a person who was suffering from delusions, and I just to kind of take the pressure off of him, I said, "On you as well, ma'am. I'd like to hear what would make your, your what would have made your life easier as the spouse,"
Mhm.
which gave, I think, Mr. Reynolds enough time to kind of compose himself and kind of think about things. And the first thing he said was, which was probably the most powerful thing that he could have said. He made a very clear eye contact with me. It was very interesting how I think everyone in the room saw how honest uh, and focused he was, but it was very focused to me, not to the room. He didn't address the room; he addressed me. And the first thing he said, which you very rarely hear from anyone that is trying to help you with Parkinson's, is well, the first thing is your kids are going to be okay. It's going to be okay. They are going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that he said was,
Well, and he said why though too.
yeah, right. Well, yeah, go ahead. Why? I think I know why, but what
No,
was your?
I don't want to take the story. I just want to make sure you got that because it's an important part of why they're going to be okay. It's
Yeah,
because of you. I mean, he made sure to point that out that based on the way you had framed the question and you'd already, I mean, you had revealed your humanity to him. You were doing more than transacting in this interaction. As an observer, me watching this, I see people, and I've seen Ryan before, and people, ask sometimes, and God bless them, difficult, stilted questions or things that are awkward. But you gave him the opportunity to be the best him, is what I'm saying. And he
I appreciate it.
shined the light back on you by saying that your kids are going to be fine clearly but based on who you are. Like he made it an instant snap judgment on you, which was gorgeous.
Yeah. So I really didn't pick that up
Yeah.
until just yesterday. So because I was watching the video, Kelly Paprish had put it out on
Yeah.
the ATMRD site, and I he was speaking, so it wasn't quickly, but it was quietly. I think he was kind of, and he's because uh, he said the one thing he wished his dad had done was to let him help,
Yep. That's it.
to let him help. And so I heard that part, but what I didn't hear after that, and you're right, he did say this now that I heard this yesterday. He says, and I think you're going to let your kids help. He said something to that effect. He says, by the nature of where I was and what I was doing, you're not going to be like my father. The other
Yep.
interesting thing he said, which was, he said, his dad was a person who was a police officer, and he made the comment that the brave thing to do, it wasn't the thing that was common for people of his dad's um, genre or generation.
Right.
The brave thing to do is to let people help you. And
Right.
so his dad probably thought being brave was just handling this on his own.
Right.
But what Ryan Reynolds' perspective was the brave thing to do was to let other people help you. And
Yeah.
that was an interesting uh, point that he made. And later, I wrote him a letter, which I kind of addressed what the bravery in that process. But that was a great interaction.
It was amazing. And that line, uh, let him help, which became I retitled it slightly, let them help in a blog I wrote, was one that I know Holly Valdivia's from Acadia loved and championed in that moment because that's the shining light of opportunity within all of this, not just within Parkinson's, but certainly in this space, is to get past the individual pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I'm a hero because I am, especially that a lot of males, we experience or think we're supposed to do. And that the kids, as Ryan expressed, are pining to know. They're pining to help. And I am an example of that too, that thank God my dad has let me tell his story through the Boys of Summer documentaries.
Hmm.
Because he is, in his case, was generous enough to let me use my medium, which is filmmaking, to, help him. Right. And what that's done is it opened him up to a community of people across the country, across the world, really, and experiences that his general attitude would have been much like Ryan's dad, to just kind of handle it on his own, stoic of that same generation. No, no, I've got this. And it was not at all comfortable. My dad's not, he's not antisocial by any means, but he's not a big go out and ask for help thing. And, the foundation of Boys of Summer, the very first film was, we're going to hit the road with $3,000 of the 15 I think we need to make it. And we're basically going to go and ask for help on the road, with a 501(c)(3) letter, and have people join us for baseball tailgate parties, and we'll beg, borrow, not steal, but beg, borrow, and hope our way across America to learn about Parkinson's, and that's what we did. So that phrase, "let them help," I mean, it's our kids, but I think it's also society at large. People want to help when given the right opportunity. Do you think? I mean, do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. People want to help. It's hard to know how to help. I think that's
Right,
the biggest thing, right? It's really
right,
hard to know how to help. You know, I'm not. I'm probably not too different from your dad in some respects. You know, I came from a background where I was a physician, so I was the one that was answering everyone else's issues, always taking care of everyone else, never asked for help for myself. And then I was in the military, and in particularly in special operations,
hmm,
so supporting special forces. You know, we weren't known for asking for people's help. We were known for our quiet professionalism, and
right,
so we were there to solve the world's problems, the hero kind of perspective,
yeah,
and it was easy to and you don't usually see Superman asking someone for help. You don't usually
right.
see any of the heroes that we know saying, "Hey, I could really use your assistance in this." Now, of course, I know it's a team effort, but uh, that's one thing you definitely learn in those situations is a team effort. But
Right.
the team is highly selected, and it's just a different world. It's not a situation where you typically ask for help. But this is a very humbling disease, and you can either ask for help and receive it and appreciate it when it's given to you, or you can be embarrassed by asking for the help and let it add to the weight that you have with this disease already. I mean, it's a rucksack, and you can either you can either add more weight to that rucksack on your own by just not asking for help and not appreciating the help you got, or feeling bad about when you get help. I remember very early in the disease, one of the things that kind of happened to me was I had a lot of rigidity. I couldn't move my arm. And I thought it was frozen shoulder, but I didn't know why I had frozen shoulder. I thought it was possibly related to an injury that I'd had doing something. Um, but it was really hard to put on a coat. It was hard for me to put on a coat. And I remember being in a store trying to try on a sports coat, and I could not get this sports coat on to save my life. And I was just really struggling with this thing. And just a complete stranger walked over and says, "Here, can I help you with that?" And and help me put it on. And at that moment, there were two things I could have done. I could have, you know, crushed myself in embarrassment with the thought that, man, I can't even put on a jacket by myself and I have to have a complete stranger do that for me. Or I could do what I tended to do, the opposite, which was thank God that person put that coat on for me. I was struggling so hard. And it was so nice of that person to see that, recognize that, and be able to help me. The same thing with my kids now, when sometimes it's hard for me to stand up from a chair, but my sons move quickly and quietly, and they put a hand out and they yank me up out of the chair, and we just move on. No one makes a big deal out of it. But I'm so thankful when they do that. But I could take the whole perspective of woe is me, and that they have to help me at, just the ripe age of 56 years old. I have to be helped by my children out of a chair. I could add the weight that just I could add that weight back into my rucksack and just make my life harder, but it wouldn't do me any good.
Yeah. The very nature of this whole thing, the let them help, going back to the beginning of your story, you're looking around the room and there's a crowd of people who clearly want to ask Ryan something but are scared, right? What will I sound like? Will I ask something silly? Geez, whatever, insecurities go into that sort of thing. But that's a microcosm of the world. How many times are all of us needing help, but afraid to ask because of what it might look like? And they're not always high pressured situations like having an A-list celebrity in a room full of people, but even in a one-on-one situation with a doctor or a loved one, it's revealing something of self. And you, once again, I mean, I'm going to heap the praise on you here, so pardon if it embarrasses you, but you revealed the vulnerability in front of that room that allowed, and this is the gift giving cycle. It's so important to highlight. It allowed Ryan to go beyond his already charming, witty self, which we expect, right? Knowledgeable, empathetic self, generally, which he showed in spades, and you tapped a new level of his humanity because you gave him the gift of vulnerability, right?
Mm,
And the way you described it was very interesting, the way he locked in on you. And I think what you got a piece of there is you got a piece of Ryan's extraordinary acting skills. He is a very gifted actor. And when an actor is locked in a scene, they know it's because they've been given something emotionally, right? It's
mm,
very hard to generate that independently, right?
mm,
You can do it, but if somebody gives you something, the immediate reaction is, oh my gosh, it's not for me to hold on to. It is for me to, like a game of catch, throw back. And
right.
and so that's what happened in that scenario. So interestingly, that within where he eventually got with, let him help, let them help, however you want to phrase that, that inciting incident of you doing that, it sets everything off. You
Yeah,
have to.
I do think there was a somewhat of an emotional connection. And when I wrote in my letter back to him saying thank you, I did recognize that, as an actor, there were two things he could do. As an
Mhm.
actor, he's trained to manage his emotions and put on a face that whatever the face needed to be for the moment at that moment, because that's what he does for a living, is present a has the ability to present a false face to the environment that he's around.
True.
Or he could have been very honest, and allowed that question to penetrate his heart and then respond with a heartfelt response. And I really do think it was the latter.
I
Uh,
agree.
and I think everyone else in the room thought it was the latter. That was it. I think it caught him off guard a little bit. He even
Mhm.
said that. But it was a true testament to his own humanity, that he was willing to be as vulnerable with me as I had been with him. And that was definitely a vulnerable moment for me. I mean, normally I'm pretty well spoken, but even you could hear the cracking in my voice, because it is a huge fear for me that my children will have to deal with this, demented or deluded person, who is very different from the person I am today, or
Mm.
that I think I am anyway. So yeah, it's a big fear, and the fact that he was very what he also had, and this is the reason, part of the reason I asked this question. He had a unique experience that not many people have, and he had the opportunity to share that, and
Mm.
he had a nugget of advice for my children that only a child who had gone through this could give. And
Right.
so that was why I asked the question. Really, was I couldn't think of anyone else in the world that would have been able to be. I could take that answer and give it to my kids, and this is a person who's been through this, and this is what his father told him. So that's what I should tell my own children. Uh,
So you sat the kids down, you said, look, Deadpool told me.
that's right.
Got there. Really? You talked to Deadpool?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that was an interesting thing when we came back because the videos came out and like, okay, how did you end up talking to Ryan Reynolds? And that was the big question about it. But we did have a
so,
conversation about that, that was the other part of the conversation, as to kind of make lighten things up. We did joke a little bit about Deadpool, and
well, you
and
hit him.
yeah, go ahead. What was
You,
your question?
I mean, you threw a perfectly comedically timed, punch at him
Right,
when you said, "Well, I didn't make Green Lantern," and he opened the door to that earlier by making fun of himself, of course, to that. So it wasn't like you were coming out of left field with it.
right.
But I mean, again, it was, I mean, I can only, I wasn't close enough to see, but I mean, I could almost see him going, "Well done, sir," because it was a great line. It was perfectly timed.
Well, we were just so both intense at that moment,
Yeah.
and the whole room was just not heavy, but just
Yeah.
engaged in that interchange that I guess maybe out of my own discomfort, I said, well, at least I never made a Deadpool or never made a Green Lantern. I wanted to lighten the mood for all of us. And
Perfect.
he picked up on it. He says, yeah, but if you do, if you do make a Green Lantern, at least follow it with a Deadpool.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, he is a living example of that. And there are, of course, tons of studies that show this. It's very much the world that I live in terms of teaching improvisation, cinema therapy, about the value of laughter, particularly in times where we feel, as you mentioned, heavy or full or dark, or however you want to put that forward, that being able to laugh with, right? Not at, but with the situation.
Right.
Um, that's a very fine distinction, and it's a respectful kind of laughter that restores our humanity, and it restores both our emotional being and our ability to connect to others, right? Because when we get laser focused on this, it might be good information flowing here, but after a while, like you said, the feeling is, whoa, there's more to me than this. Because none of us, and that's why I love Acadia's campaign. I'm doing a whole commercial for them today, apparently, but
Yeah.
there's more to all of us than Parkinson's, right? Their
Yeah.
campaign, More to Parkinson's, is really well spoken and framed in that regard because although you have this fear of this part of things, guess what? You're a dad regardless. And there's
Right.
more going on in your life than this, right?
Yes. For sure. For sure.
And you're a
And
husband. Yeah.
yeah, right. And humor is such an important and valuable therapeutic in so
Yeah.
many ways. And it's not only is it therapeutic for me, but it's therapeutic for the people I meet. I mean, the first thing, it's funny, I'll be talking to someone and almost invariably, if I'm really getting engaged or talking to someone, I'll start with a tremor, and immediately they'll look down at my hand. They'll see my hand, and I'll notice them looking at my hand. And that's an awkward moment where a minute we were talking about something, and then I distracted them with this tremor, and they saw it, and you can see it quizzically cross their mind. What in the world is going on with that? And
Mm.
so, I usually I say, oh yeah, sorry about that. I have Parkinson's, and so sometimes I'm going to have a tremor. The good news is I can make a great martini, but it has to be shaken, not stirred.
There you go.
Uh, and everyone laughs, or I say, yeah, you might notice me shaking. It doesn't mean that I'm short on alcohol or caffeine. This is just because I have Parkinson's. And and then everyone laughs, and we just move past it. It just
Yeah.
they they don't feel awkward about having noticed this, and I don't feel awkward because I did it. And if it happens again, they don't pay any attention to it because they're just like, it's that humor has made it okay, if you will.
There,
That makes a
yeah.
big difference.
That very same story. The famous sports announcer Joe Buck, baseball, football announcer. Are you aware of
No,
who he is?
I can't say I'm very familiar with him, but
Well, he's a person out there does a lot of work in that regard. His father, Jack Buck, was the legendary baseball announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals and had Parkinson's disease. And I was able to interview Joe in the first Boys of Summer, and he told almost exactly the story you're saying right there about when his dad, Jack, would go to the stories. talk about how like he and Muhammad Ali met and shook hands, and it took people 15 minutes to pull them apart. Um,
Right.
that type of thing. And he mentioned it just from the same way that if people are noticing, but they don't know how to feel about it because they don't know what you think about it, and you disarm them by saying, "Yeah, I know it's real, and guess what? Here we go." And then we all laugh, and it's no longer a thing. There might still be a tremor, there might be that, but now we've given it its proper place, and the rest of the humanity can flood in.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes we talk about hallucinations and delusion, and I say, I don't think I have any delusions, but I do wake up every morning saying, "What a great looking guy that guy is." So I might be a
I
little,
love that one. That's
it
great.
might be a little delusional, but it's probably harmless.
Yeah, I'll leave that up to you to decide.
That's right. My wife agrees, so that's
Yeah,
all that
so
matters.
we're properly delusionally married. Yeah, no, that's really great stuff. And so, I mean, from this great episode, I mean, those things happened. You and I got to spend a fair amount of time, including a lovely dinner one night where we really got to know each other. And I just wanted to, as one of the things that came out of this, the ATMRD for me was, I gave a talk and it was with Indu Subramanian, and the framework was connection is medicine. And that was the first time I really started using it. It was based on some of what I told you about that research I'd done with support group leaders and attendees, and also that and what had come out of the screening of Boys of Summer Third Base at World Parkinson Congress, where it had that really raucous reception. People loved it and reacted like it was Rocky Horror Picture. And I was overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So I've been since that time, and I know we haven't talked, but I've been running with, and it's really gotten good traction. I wanted to get your feel for this. This idea of connection is medicine, that in Parkinson's, we know, right, about 2007, 2008 starts the revolution of exercise is medicine. And now that's fully versed, right? But before that time, medically speaking, and really it wasn't until probably the 20 teens that it really started grabbing on. And now it's, of course, clinically, the gold standard. But people treated exercise for Parkinson's as, well, if you do it, fine. If you don't, fine. It's not really a thing. And now, 20 years later, it is gold standard. The connection is medicine part that I'm trying to build off of that is to deal with the psychosocial emotional, which I feel like we're just waking up to. And, because of people like Indu Subramanian, Bradley McDaniels, Gregory Pontone, other researchers who are looking at these parts of it, the classic iceberg, right? And saying, you see the tremors, you don't understand or feel all of the psychosocial emotional side. If we can get people to accept that connection is medicine, the isolation is a killer, therefore connection is medicine, we take ourselves beyond the domain of treating connection as, well, if you have a support group, or maybe you should talk to a therapist. It's like that's horribly inadequate for the reality of what's going on. And we start to fund all of these social services and means of people doing things to connect to themselves, to connect to their families, to connect to their communities and neighborhoods, because it's medicinal. Now, you as a doctor, what do you think of that pitch?
So I think there's several. First of all, I agree with it, and from a clinical perspective, uh, healthcare. I'm a family medicine doctor, so and when I was growing up in family medicine, medicine has changed a lot. Your family doctor is not really a family doctor the way they used to be. What used to be great about your family doctor was the connection. He was part of your family. You
Right.
trusted him or her. They knew what was going on. They knew all your kids. They delivered your babies. They buried your grandparents. They cared for you your whole life. And family medicine has changed a lot. But that whole biopsychosocial model and understanding people are more than medicines, and the medicines they take and the diagnosis they have. I greatly agree with that. And the basis of that is a trusting connection between the clinician and the person who has the disease. So yeah, connection is definitely medicine. It's definitely therapeutic. The interesting part about connection with others is, and I've struggled with this of late, is you and this actually came out, really ties in with what Carly Simon recently came out. If you've just recently talked
Mhm.
about, you heard what she said. She says she talked about this, the apathy that happens with this diagnosis. She described it as like being a starfish on a beach that you just can't move, don't want to move. There's nothing to move you, and that I've suffered that more than I've ever suffered. And I'm a self starter for the most part. I've kind of been a very and I've suffered a lot more depression, and then felt bad that I was depressed because I have nothing to be depressed about. I'm very blessed. I have wonderful children, wonderful wife, enough resources to manage our situations, and yet here I am depressed. I feel bad about it. That whole psychosocial piece to Parkinson's is something that's very, very, I think, not understood and not shared. And it's, as a person who's with Parkinson's, it's really hard to overcome that. You need something that's going to force you to overcome that, and something that you know. There's two pieces to therapeutics. First is you got to convince the patient that the medicine they're taking is going to be good for them, and that's a trust, right? Take this pill, and I promise you, it's going to help you. And that trust, you will force yourself to take the pill, even if you don't feel like taking the pill. And then the second part of that is, people continue to take the pill when they see that the pill works, right? So you've got to reflect back to people that the connection is improving your life in some way, shape, or form. And so if we're going to do that, what we have to do is two things. One, we have to prove, and it shouldn't be too hard, but we got to get the message across that just like exercise, you have to force yourself to be connected, that it's going to make a difference, and you just have to do it even when you don't feel like doing it. It's something that's going to be critical to your doing it, and then you've got to set the conditions for showing some way that it does improve a person's life, and reflect that back to them. It's easier when you're taking a cholesterol medicine. I can say, look, your numbers went down, right?
Yeah.
I can look at your blood pressure. Look, your blood pressure was 180 over 90. Now it's 120 over 70. And you're just sitting there. We've got to find some metrics in people's lives, that allows them to see the benefit of the intervention.
So this is exactly the disconnect that I think you're talking about, and really doing a great job of bringing it forward, because we agree on the problem, we agree on the void. However, and I don't mean you and I mean kind of general,
Gotcha.
that there is not agreement on how to, actively treat it. Like we say, cognitive behavioral therapy, generally thought to be a reasonable thing. Support groups, depends, but generally thought to be a outlet resource. In my work in particular, I'll say with improvisation and the cinema therapy storytelling, I have a fair amount of data. However, it's not quantified in a way that traditional medicine, it's more qualitative, right? Um, Looks at it and says, oh, I know what to do with it. Like you said, a quantitative study where you can measure, blood and, oxygen levels or anything else. Boom, boom, boom. Medicine likes that. It's simple, it's easy, it's repeatable. Boom. The somewhat messy and difficult part about this, and that's why I think it requires a different type of intervention, is, and Boz Bloom actually just hit on this. I don't know if you saw his article. He says, what if Parkinson's is a million different diagnoses or millions of different diagnoses? It's not one. And therefore, there's not a pill, there's not a cure, and there's not a intervention or an intervention.
Right.
There needs to be an intervention that has flexibility for the intervention to flex to the patient's or participant's needs.
Yeah.
And 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 again, I know that's where institutionally people start to wobble and go, wait a minute, if it's not 250 milligrams twice a day, it's like, so at any rate, that's where I'm at. I know with the things I do, I can point to the success. I can give the testimonials. I can, the latest part of it's going to be people publishing works, and hopefully in that it's still artistic, but people can look at that and read not traditional testimonials of people telling their personal journey, but people telling creative stories, and they go, this is just a great story. And I didn't know that this part of Parkinson's was that, which happens to be in there. It's not what it's about, but it's like getting to see inside of somebody because I think that's what the psychosocial emotional demands. We need to see or feel what's going on inside of the person experiencing it. And art is a perfect, and not just storytelling, but music, painting, dance, all of these reflections, like Carly Simon, by her giving that artistic representation, people went, oh, metaphor, got it, right?
Right.
Apathy, otherwise, define it clinically, right? But
Right.
tell me it's a starfish, and you're like, I see it now. So if the goal is to get to empathy, I think art's an excellent intervention.
Yeah. Well, art. Uh, there's a fine line between art and science, and it's pretty blurry if you ask me, because science in itself is art, just
Thank you.
that we, in our own mind, think we're measuring, but we don't know. We think we have the ruler until we realize, oh, there's a whole different ruler that's actually there, right? So it
Yeah.
starts off with, oh, there's bacteria, and we're like, oh, that's everything, and then we're like, oh, wait, there's things in bacteria. There's mitochondria, and oh, we didn't know that ruler was there. So we don't really know what we think we know from a art. There's a lot more art in science than there is science in art,
Thank
but
you.
but what art does do is it connects us on a very emotional level in a very interesting way, uh, and but we've bred ourselves out of valuing art in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
and taking it seriously, or even self reflection on how art affects us.
Right.
We watch a movie for its for whatever reasons. Maybe it's the excitement, but we don't appreciate necessarily the art of that. And music is the same way. We hear the lyrics, but we don't allow ourselves to fully immerse ourselves in the complexity of the music.
Yeah.
One of the things I do is Guitars for Vets, and Guitars for Vets. The whole goal behind Guitars for Vets is helping veterans who may or may not be suffering from different challenges learn how to play a guitar. We teach them 10 lessons, and then we give them a free guitar. We give them a guitar to learn with, and then we teach them how to we give them a free guitar for that process. And it's really to connect them to an art that allows them to express their feelings and emotions in a positive way and gives them something to do. And interestingly enough, for me, I got into it because with Parkinson's, I've played guitar for many, many years, but I was having more trouble playing guitar with Parkinson's. But I figured I could teach people how to play guitar, maybe not as well as I used to, and that's been very therapeutic. So art connects you both emotionally in terms of expression as an individual, but it also connects you to other people. When you share those experiences, and you've
That's
got
right.
to get the key. I think there's a going back to art. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, right? With this connection thing, it's got to be a spoonful of sugar. I go into sometimes these therapeutic groups, and it's not sugary at all. It's a complaint fest of
Yeah.
16 people on a Zoom thing, and everyone is woe is me, or they're shooting down their doctor for not having accomplished something that they thought they should have had, and
Mhm.
it doesn't. There is nothing therapeutic about it in my eyes, because maybe you're sharing your miseries, and other people are potentially saying, oh, well, I go through that too, and so I'm not alone. But more times
Right.
than not, you leave there with everyone just having vented their frustrations with life. And
So,
because it takes like a good director, in a I'm not a I don't make movies, right? But uh I've written some songs, I've written some poems, I've written. If you're making something artistic, you are thoughtful about how you lead that conversation in such a way that it becomes a therapeutic, enjoyable thing. Sometimes our our support groups don't end up being that. They end up being maybe detrimental in some respects. Uh,
so yeah, you're on the razor's edge of exactly where my research led, because we interviewed 1,100 support group leaders and attendees, and that part of it came out. There's a lack of training for support group leaders to a person who are all well-meaning, and you know sometimes the reason they made it is because no one else did. So they, like you, wrote put their hand up. They asked a question or said, I'll do this. I don't know how. I'll make it up as I go along. And God bless them. The easiest thing to do to get people together is to let them vent. What I would call that is junk food support. It
Mhm.
feels and tastes good in the moment, right? They're just like, we know about, what anger is like to get out there. Yeah. But if that's all it is or all we are, we've missed the broad array of our humanity. And over time, people go, yeah, I don't need any more French fries right now.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, it's making me start to feel, like you said, a little sick. It's counterproductive. And one of the things I'm actually building right now, with the help of with Clemmy, with PMD Alliance, is this training program, Connection, the Power of Connection, that is going to use a piece of the cinema therapy thing, which you're part of the grant, by the way, another thing we can talk about,
Yeah.
that we're doing for the VA, but is using a piece of cinema therapy, like you said, off the bat. We play a song and we don't just listen to it, we move to it, and then we talk about what was going on in that song. Like, say, Stand By Me. Everybody loves Stand By Me. They sing along, this, that, and the other. But in the right space, you hear it and you go, gosh, what did he mean, when the night was dark, and all those things. And does that reflect an emotion in me? And what is that, the moon's the only light we'll see. Oh, is the moon a metaphor for XYZ? And all of a sudden things start unpeeling. And then people play a little bit of improv, not for performance or laughs, but to get to know each other. Because improv at its heart is about listening, and that heightened listening, because the environment is one where we have set it up to be a safe, brave, and vulnerable space. People can go, oh, and I heard you say, and reflect to each other pieces of themselves that they might on the outside keep doors up, because maybe it's not safe in the outside world to show some of these things. But in here, oh, what a relief. I can actually say. And boom, you got that. And then comes the external validation. In this case, we watch a clip from the first series I have, Shawshank Redemption. Andy Dufresne shows up at prison, falsely accused, but going into this wide world of, oh my God, what am I doing here? He's got a set of expectations and assumptions. And in comes Red looking at him, this tall glass of water, who, I'm betting to be the one who cries mommy tonight. He's got assumptions about each other. And how do those worlds collide, as they go? And
Right.
and by watching that scene, people can go, well, I saw Andy do this, or I saw Red do this, or say that. Then we can take it back and go, okay, so what do you assume about Parkinson's? What did you feel when you first arrived with your diagnosis or first showed up to a support group? And all of a sudden, now we're talking about connection because we re-lensed it, and we've given people the opportunity to, like you say, do an awful lot more than complain on the surface level. It's like, wait
Right.
a minute, what we'd really like to do here is connect more
Mm.
deeply. That requires trust, that requires some skill, and maybe it requires some external validation, something for us all to focus on. A song we all hear, a clip of a movie we all look at. But like you said, not for entertainment purposes, for, oh gosh, I never noticed he did that, or he said that, or he looked that way. All of that art comes forward, and more is under the surface than we recognize, which is a metaphor for us. More is under the surface than we recognize in each other.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's interesting. There's a couple of things that come to mind with that. One is if you can take people off of a focus of themselves, that is usually a better, focus them on something that we all look at.
That's right.
Then it deflects the attention, and and then as you discuss it more and you move towards a common goal, you get closer together.
That's right.
And faith has been a huge part of our life. And recently, and one of the most important artists that I would say has been rooted through my life is Stephen Curtis Chapman. And he recently wrote a book and with his wife, and he brought up something that my wife and I actually wrote a song for our wedding that said something very similar. And the concept is that people, at least in the setting of a marriage, but I think it's the same for any large group of people. Um, in the setting of a marriage, if you have Christ at the top and you and your wife are at opposing ends because you're very different, but you're all focusing towards you're both focusing towards a similar destination. Even though you're very different, you start to come closer and closer together, and you get connections. You may not even see that,
Yeah.
and that is something that I think therapeutically, what you're doing by setting that goal of assessing something, and getting a group of people who might be on a very wide spectrum, but hearing them, they will be better connected, and not even focused at each other. That in the song that I wrote for that I sang at our wedding, the phrase was, and if you will look with me to him in the joy and in our pain, we will be always be together in his name.
Mm.
And the whole concept was that no matter what we were going through as individuals, if we had that focus on Christ, and we were always focused towards being more Christ-like, we would always get closer together by the very nature of focusing on that. And I think that from a therapeutic perspective, you're doing the same thing. You're setting something but people don't know how to do that, right?
Right.
We're really taught in cognitive behavioral therapy for one person, right?
Right.
I'm going to teach one person to reflect on their thoughts and ideas and help them through that process. And to do group therapy is a very challenging thing because you don't know the people. The groups change constantly. It's a very, very hard thing to do. So one way to get after that is to have something that everyone focuses on, which is, I think, a good way you're doing it.
That's right. Those external signposts that start, and like you said, I think it takes the right leader to really embody and embrace that at the beginning and say, I'm not here to tell you what's going to happen, right? Is in fact to own that thing I always say at the start of the meeting is, I don't know what's about to happen, the seven scary words. And
Yeah.
that puts us all on a similar plane. It's like, I'm going to present some stuff for us all to look at and feel. And yes, it's been curated, it's thoughtful, it's, for us to play with. However, this is going to vary based on what all of y'all are feeling and maybe what I'm feeling too. There's going to be things I guarantee that are going to come up that nobody expected. And every time we feel a connection and somebody says something and someone else goes, ooh, yes, and right, boom, a
Right.
line there. And someone else says, yes, and boom. And you see the spokes of the wheel come together and it starts spinning. And it's like very, very cool stuff.
Yeah, and if that's a sweet taste, people want to come back to it, right?
There you go.
So that's the spoonful of sugar, right? That makes the medicine go down. That is exactly what you're shooting for. Is you want this to be an enjoyable experience, and you have to be trained as a leader and to how to lead those kinds of situations. But you also have to lead others, and that's
That's
a very different thing, because it's one thing to be the person in the group, and say, well, what do you think about that, and how do you feel about this? But it's more valuable to encourage others to encourage others to encourage others, because that's what actually creates the connection. Otherwise, everyone just looks for group therapy from you every week, and
right.
that doesn't create connection. That's just creates a therapeutic answer
It's
machine.
a bottleneck, right? And that's exactly my purpose in trying to train this stuff. I adore teaching cinema therapy. I adore teaching improv. But, like one of my improv classes that we teach every week is on Thursday, that class is run by the students. I set it up and then basically I say, who's going to lead the game today? And each person starts leading a game. And they're learning how to be facilitators because it'll never grow unless they take some ownership of that side of it. And it's the same with now treating this, training the support group leaders. Yes, they invite me to come and speak, and that's fine. But like you said, now it's like, well, when's Robert coming back? It's not about me.
Right.
It's got to be about what your guys. I can go and sprinkle some seeds, but y'all got to, water it and make sure it gets light and everything. That's the only way it's going to grow.
Yeah, and it's very challenging because you have different, as you know, there's bell curves of people who are more concrete and people who are less and more able to think outside their concrete worlds. And so,
Right.
and the problem, one of the problems with Parkinson's, I think, as you cognitively decline, you just become so much more concrete, right? You're fighting a disease that's going to make it harder and harder to emote. And so, literally, dopamine is, part of your emotional process. And it's not just dopamine; it's the serotonergic inhibitors. I mean, not inhibitors; those are medicines, but it's the serotonin in your brain. It's not just the dopamine that's the only thing that's affected in Parkinson's. So you are working against a challenging situation. But I will say this: one of the things that was very interesting at the beginning of my diagnosis, when I at the end of the day I could barely walk. I was my whole right side of my body would drag. And I was, people would ask what's wrong. I'd be like, I don't know. I don't really care. So it was apathy. I walked like Igor. Like it was like dragging my right side of my body. Uh, and and but once I got on medicines and once I really started exercising, I mean, I was always a person who exercised. I was in the military in special operations. We exercised. That was not a big thing. But once I really started doing the exercises and the variability of exercises, weight, uh, cardiovascular, taught myself to juggle, did all kinds of different things that would force me to neurologically change the situation. I got a lot better. But the reason I got a lot better quickly was because I still had the neuroplasticity to do this. And I think
Mhm.
that's going to make a big difference as this disease progresses. I the same is true for if you get into this diagnosis and you wait 7 years to get connection, you are going to start so far down the path. The apathy you'll have learned apathy. You won't have the neuroplasticity. I believe. I don't know this from a clinical I just believe this is the case. You are going to start so far behind the power curve that to get the real therapeutic benefit of it is going to be very challenging. So really, you've got to figure out this connection early, very early in the process, and that's a scary thing because one of the first things I did was I went to a brain health summit here in Orlando, Florida, and I saw an entire room of people with Parkinson's, and it scared the bejesus
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because I was like, holy crap, I could be one of these people, not judging them, but just seeing the infirmity of the
Yeah.
whole room was,
Yeah.
I was like, man, I never want to come back to this place again.
Right.
That having been said, but that one interaction actually, well, it was the second interaction that I found myself at a situation is where I met the ATMRD people, and the ATMRD people actually connected me. They pulled me into their group, and that's made
Mhm.
a huge difference. Connections to you, connections to some of the other people that we've met at different conferences, and that's been very therapeutic in my journey. And I'm glad I'm doing it when I still have the ability to emote and recognize that. Because if you wait once this disease has gotten much farther, well, it pushes you to isolation. I mean, it is a steady force to isolation. So you've got to learn that lesson early, I think, in the diagnosis, just like exercise.
That's fascinating. And there it is. So this is back to what I said, that if we can accept exercise as medicine, we have to accept connection as medicine. And like you said, at an early place when you have the most neurology capability of it, because we know that right now exercise is the only disease modifying intervention there is, right? So if we can develop some of these disease modifying interventions on the psychosocial side, we can see that they activate the emotions. And just like we activate the body to slow progression, what if we were to healthily activate the emotions and expressions and social conditions that did the same thing? I mean, this is a hypothesis at this point, and I fully own that. But I strongly believe that, we're not just meat and bones and muscle, right? That these things, if we're having this effect on one side, it's very reasonable to think we could have that effect. And by the way, what's the negative of becoming more psychosocially connected?
Well, on one level, yeah, it's try to reduce the progression of the disease as it relates to
Right.
shared burden and those kinds of things. But it's also an immediate therapeutic
That's true.
intervention. And here's why I say that. There's a group of people out there, most of the world, that doesn't that they don't taste things and they don't see things, right? They've never been taught to taste something. They've never been thought to see something and see all the intricacies of that. Yeah, they look at, especially when you're looking at TV, right? So, I mean, when you look at a Van Gogh, or you look at a Monet, Monet's a good idea. If you get very close to the Monet, you can see all the little strokes, but you really can't see the picture. It's just kind of blurry. It really doesn't look very nice, but you see the mastery of the strokes. When you stand 15 feet from Monet, it changes the whole picture of how everything is. Someone's got to teach you how to appreciate that. Same thing
Mm.
with music. You know, I taught all my children. I asked them, you know, what's the bass guitar doing there? What's the electric guitar doing there? What's the keyboards doing there? I've taught them to delineate and taste music, if you will. If you were a sommelier, you know, you have to learn how to taste things. Well, most of us don't know how to do that. So what we can do, if I have, let's say I have 7 good years of the ability to appreciate life because I'm on this path that's going to take me 10 years. Well, wouldn't it be great if someone taught me today how to start tasting life much better? And
Right,
then at least for those 7 great years, I'm tasting more of life than I ever did.
right,
That's an immediate intervention in wellness, that by teaching me the skill to be able to appreciate what's around me in a more effective way and let that touch my heart and in a better and more functional way, that immediately is therapeutic, even if it doesn't prevent the progression. For several years I still had that thought, that ability. It's a bit like the dopamine. You know, the I was a little reticent to get on dopamine, levodopa initially, for a number of reasons. And my neurologist says, "Look, here's the reality. Uh, your neurons are dying. I don't know how fast your neurons are going to die. There's going to be a point at which dopamine doesn't even help you
yeah,
because your neurons won't be there to respond to the dopamine.
right.
But you might have a much, much better life taking this dopamine for the next 3 to 4 years while you still have neurons to uh, to process that. Once those neurons are gone, I can't. There's no. Doesn't matter how much dopamine I give you. This connection, this learning, teaching people how to value, to emote, to appreciate art, to appreciate music, to appreciate the people in their lives in a more effective way. That's going to immediately uh, improve their lives on a day-to-day basis, even if it doesn't prevent the progression of the disease. Today
Right.
was a better day because they appreciated it.
So what you said, one of the many things you said, but one thing you said within a lot of brilliant things there was about the acceptance. And I think this is one of the harder things people have getting to, which is, first of all, there is no cure. That it's horrible, it's deflating, and it's true. That's where we're at. Now you can certainly add three little letters yet to that to throw in some
Right.
hope because that's very reasonable. The human condition says, hey, we've overcome and beat things before, and who knows when we may be close to doing that. So keep hope alive, absolutely. However, if you work from the operating position that there is no cure, everything you said makes such tremendous sense as
Right.
opposed to the bury the head in the sand or the act like it doesn't feel that bad, therefore it's not that bad. If the reality is it's in place, it's going to get worse. And therefore, like you said, maximize what you have, maybe in ways that you were waiting your whole life to do or never even realized. Like you said, does the person who doesn't taste realize they don't taste?
Right.
Probably not. You know, it isn't. I can give the example of when I became a vegetarian. It was what 25 years ago or so that I did not have a developed bitter palate in my taste buds. Vegetables were something I had because someone would put on my plate. I wouldn't pursue them. And once I became a vegetarian and started shopping differently and cooking differently and all that stuff, all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, I love broccoli. It took me a minute to get it. Oh,
Right.
kale's amazing. And look at what a sunflower green is like and what a collard green is like and all these different flavors of bitter. And all of a sudden that just unlocked a tremendous piece of me. Now, you can, again, metaphorically do that with emotions and experiences and relationships. So it's a great foundation to start from about how to taste life. I really like the way you frame that.
Yeah, I mean, well, the reality is whether you have Parkinson's or not, no one gets out of this life alive. So, so,
Jim
so
Morrison taught us that.
that's right. So I don't care what The interesting thing is, how do you taste Parkinson's?
Mm,
Right? How do you
interesting.
taste Parkinson's? It's a complex and bitter pill in some ways, but it's also it can be a very positive taste. I talk about, yeah, it kind of sucks that my sons are sometimes have to help me up out of a couch.
Right.
But man, the love that I see in them for me, because they so quickly and easily do it. And I sometimes I watch them go out of their way to watch me to see if I need the help, uh, and then I may or may not need the help. But if I don't need the help, I just say, no, I'm good, and they just stand by and watch me do it. And there's no judgment, but the love that I see in my kids is very different. It's like that in that poem I wrote that I sent you. There's a moment where in that poem I start recounting some of the things that I've seen due to Parkinson's, like the fact that my wife, ferociously chat GPTs everything about my diagnosis in some way to find a cure for how this, is going to go better. Uh, there's a you, but you have to be taught how to taste bitter
Mm,
things, right?
yeah.
And in the military, and particularly in special operations, there's a term, embrace the suck, right?
Yeah.
You've got That's not a natural thing. You have to
No.
learn how to do that. Someone has to teach you how to do that, and that's part of, I think, what therapeutically, cognitively, we should be doing, is teaching people how to taste this in a way that is not all bitter and not all bad. Uh,
No. Bittersweet is my absolute favorite emotion. I think it's the truest emotion of life. The song Bittersweet Symphony is one of my favorite songs. And, circling all of this back, because I realize I've taken already over an hour of your time. It's spectacular. We could go on all day, and we will do this again. But I just want to say the story you told of you and your boys again, all I could hear kind of screaming in the back of my head as you were doing that was, let them. And there you are letting them. This is the whole reciprocal gift giving thing. We often think it's better to give than to receive, right? And it's so we need to really examine that and I think allow for receiving to have the same benefit because the receiver is in fact giving to the giver, right?
right.
If you've ever, given a gift and had someone receive it poorly, it has a detrimental effect on you for having given, right? When
Yes.
someone receives with great kindness, respect, with the gift, we, the giver, are completed. We just want to know it mattered, that it did something, and then it does feel good. So therein lies the responsibility of the receiver to receive with grace and gratitude to
Right.
complete the circle of the gift.
Yeah, and also it's asking for help in a positive and effective way. Uh, the last story I'll tell, and it's not just with your family.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges I was running into was the ability to do this, to cut
Yeah.
my meat. Now I've gotten a little bit better, and I've actually become left-handed because I'm I was right hand dominant, but I just trained myself to do everything with my left hand now. Eventually, I'll lose my left hand dominance, and I don't know what the heck I'll do then. I'll ask people for help. But one of my friends that I was at work with, there were two things that happened early in the diagnosis. I remember I was at a job, and I had to sign my name on a piece of paper to get into a particular event. And I was with a coworker, and he saw me struggling with writing my name, and there was a long line behind me, and he, Rick just came up to me and he says, "Hey, can I just write your name for you?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that'd be great." Please do so. He wrote my name. We walked in. I didn't have this line of people behind me waiting for me to
Yeah.
write this name. He was kind enough to see that it was simple and something he could do. And I just told him, thank you so much for doing that.
Yep.
You took so much pressure off me. The other situation happened when I was having troubles cutting my meat at a steak restaurant. We're all at this beautiful steak restaurant for our job. My friend, who I've known for many years, is sitting next to me, and I'm like, man, I can't eat this steak. Everyone will be done. I will be trying to get my first bite, and more than that, I'm going to look like crazy just shaking my hands doing this while I'm just trying to saw one small piece. It's just going to be so painful. And but I went to Drew and I said, hey, I've got to go to the restroom. But listen, if I came back and that steak was cut up on my plate, I would be so happy. And so I disappeared for a minute. And when I came back, my steak was completely cut into small bite sized pieces. Drew knew exactly what I needed to do. And I just said, Drew, thank you so much. You know,
So, yeah.
but you got to have some humility in the process. You got to ask for the help, and don't be afraid to ask. That made it actually made Drew's life better, because Drew knew he made a difference in my life. Uh, People are like, "What?" There was, "Oh, I'm so sorry you have Parkinson's." I'd rather you not be sorry I have Parkinson's. I'd rather be more. It'd be better if when you see me struggling, you just cut my steak. You know.
Participate over pity, right?
Yeah,
That's what we're
exactly.
looking for.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And but you got to tell people that, and you got to be willing to accept it. You got to show them how they can help. How can the best way you can help me is this, right? You got to be
Yeah.
able to tell people that.
That's right. That's right. Dan, I can't thank you enough for all the time. Again, I know we could go on all day. What a beautiful friendship we've struck up.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad and humbled to have met you. In the brief time we had in DC, it was wonderful. This conversation was wonderful. The work we did together on the grant, which we'll talk about another time, is wonderful. And hopefully that'll grow into something
Yeah,
beautiful
that'd
that
be
we do.
fantastic.
Yeah. But in the meantime, let's just stay in touch. So many good things to continue to grow on. Keep sending me poetry.
Okay.
I'll let you know when this link is up and feel free to share it wherever you like. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for what you're doing and for giving me the opportunity to share. It is a team that makes changes people's lives, and so we change people's lives most when we're real. And so this has been real. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And let me know if Ryan ever writes you back.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I'm still hoping. It was a pretty good letter. I had some good jokes and stuff in it. Did I send you the letter?
No, but do we'll make it part of our next dose. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I sent him a letter, and it had some good quips in there. I'll send you the letter. Hopefully, he reads it. I'm sure he read it, but he's a busy guy. He probably won't respond back. But if
Who
he does,
knows?
I'll be excited. So
All
that'll be
right, man.
exciting.
You be
All right,
well,
thanks.
Dan. Talk to you soon.
All right, appreciate it. Take care.